Have you ever been home alone and felt like you weren't actually alone? No footsteps, no voices, just silence. But then, a sound, a door that wasn't open before, a feeling you can't explain. Tonight, you're about to hear terrifying stories of people who were home alone and realized too late something else was there with them. Turn off the lights, put on your headphones. Let's begin.
When I was 22, I started renting the downstairs apartment in my parents' house just to save money, but also have a little more privacy. Even though my parents would go away a decent amount, it still just felt like I had no privacy and couldn't even have friends or girls over in peace. The downstairs apartment is separated by a lockable door in the stairway. It was an open layout down there, with the mini kitchen being a part of the living room area. There was then my bedroom, bathroom, and laundry room down the hall, and a side entrance through the living room. This happened on a weekend that my parents were away, so I could be as loud as I wanted. I had my friends Anthony and Jay over just to shoot the shit and have a couple drinks on the couch watching the hockey game. Since my parents weren't home, we were blasting music as we chilled. I wouldn't say I got drunk, but I definitely got a buzz going by the end of the game. I would keep the door between my apartment and the upstairs unlocked when my parents were gone, since I didn't have to worry about them randomly coming down. I kept the drinks in the fridge upstairs since it was bigger and quite literally just worked better. Since my friends drove and had been drinking, both of them decided to crash at my place for the night. The couch down there was massive. It could easily sleep 3 people if they laid down the correct way. So after a pretty long night of drinking, I said goodnight and went to my room to go to sleep. I found myself waking up in my bed a few hours later. It was still the middle of the night, or early morning hours. I immediately heard what most likely woke me up. I heard footsteps from upstairs. Someone was walking around up there. It was a pretty natural assumption that it was Anthony or Jay going upstairs to check my parents' fridge for cold water or something, so I didn't let it bother me. I closed my eyes again, only to hear something else just a couple minutes later. The sound of my bedroom doorknob. Someone tried twisting it, but it was locked. I always lock my bedroom door, it's just a force of habit. I wondered why either of them were trying to come in, but I was tired and figured if I just didn't say anything and pretended to be asleep, they'd go back to sleep themselves. Maybe it sounds weird, but I just didn't have the energy to be bothered at all, and it worked. I fell asleep shortly after that. When I woke up the next morning, Anthony was already gone, but Jay was still asleep on the couch. When he heard me open the fridge door, he slowly started moving around and rubbing his eyes. I asked him if he was trying to come into my room last night, and he said no, he didn't think so, but that he didn't remember because he got pretty drunk. He and I went to a nearby deli to get some bacon, egg, and cheeses and coffee, and then we ate them in my backyard. He left not long after that, and I pretty much went about my day as usual. I didn't ask Anthony if he tried coming into my room because honestly I didn't care that much about it. It really wasn't a huge deal. I think I spent most of that Saturday out of the house doing stuff with other friends. I got back home pretty late at night, but not really intoxicated because that day was more of a marathon, and by then I'd sobered up. I was beat though, so I had a snack, washed up, and went straight to bed. When I say went to bed, I actually mean I crawled into bed and watched like an hour of something on TV. After I turned off the TV, right away, I heard it. Creaks and thumps from above, almost sounding like footsteps similar to the night before, directly overhead in the kitchen upstairs. I had to really focus and listen, but the sound stopped. I felt my heart start beating a bit faster. I felt a slight nervous feeling in my gut for a few minutes as I was sitting up and waiting to hear something else. Eventually, I laid back down and relaxed, realizing it was most likely just some normal house settling noises, and my paranoid thoughts were making them out to be louder than they were. I couldn't have been more wrong. I should have trusted my initial feeling. When I heard the doorknob to my bedroom door move again, I sprang up so quickly that you'd think I was about to get hit by a bus. The doorknob only moved for a couple seconds like it did the night before, but tonight, there was a light knock at the door followed by the doorknob. I didn't say a word. I reached for my phone, which was on the bed, and started texting my family along with Anthony and Jay. I knew the chances of it being one of my friends were next to zero, but deep down I was hoping one of them would by some chance respond back saying, yes, it's me. My parents didn't answer the phone, they must have been asleep. They were not supposed to be back until Monday. There was no way I was about to say, "Who's there?" I quietly got out of my bed and hid behind the corner dresser, grabbing a blunt object in the scary chance that whoever was out there would kick the door down and rush the bed. I'm not kidding, I think 10 minutes went by and I didn't move from the spot, but there wasn't another set of knocks. I called 911 finally and whispered as quietly as I could while still being loud enough to hear. I waited on the line with a 911 operator until the police arrived. Since I didn't feel safe exiting the room, I asked the operator if she could tell the police to meet me at my bedroom window. Once an officer was outside my window, they gave it a tap and I went to open it. Thank God I was on the first floor. I handed him the key to the side door, and moments later I heard the entrance to my apartment open. It was only then that I left my bedroom and was greeted by 2 officers. I turned on all the lights. My apartment was small with not many places to hide, so the search down there was quick. Then we went up to the main floor of the house and searched it. Nothing. And then we got upstairs. I told the officers what each room was before they'd enter. It was when they entered my parents' room that I heard a commotion about 30 seconds later. I was outside in the hallway when I heard it. I took one peek into the room and saw 2 officers yelling at someone under my parents' bed. I felt a knot in my stomach. I was told to wait downstairs. It was minutes later that they were walking down a tall, dirty, scary-looking man in a sweatshirt and shorts. They asked me if I knew this man, and I said of course not. The look of hate that man gave me was haunting. He looked like he could have been homeless, crazy, or both. Once he was out of the house, I felt a million times better. The police told me that if I or my parents wanted to follow up with this, to call the precinct. After they left, the first thing I did was text every family and friends group chat I had. Being that it was so late, only a few people responded. I called my parents first thing in the morning to explain what happened. They were of course in awe, as anyone would be, but because the man was homeless and nothing was apparently stolen, my parents didn't pursue any legal action. I feel like it's possible I left the front door unlocked that night Jay and Anthony came over, and he simply walked right in when we were blasting music. Or, a scarier thought, he could have been in the house for much longer than that, and we just never knew. I've always loved the quiet. I moved up to this little cabin in rural upstate New York about 5 years ago, away from the chaos of the city. The place is big, secluded, and the woods stretch out far beyond my property. The nearest neighbor is miles away, and the only sounds you can hear are the wind in the trees and the occasional bird chirping in the distance. It's peaceful, and that's how I like it. Fishing is my thing. I spend most of my time on the lake that sits just behind my house. It's the perfect place to escape everything. I don't mind being alone. Hell, I enjoy it. The cabin has a huge deck that looks out over the woods. I often sit out there with a cold beer in my hand, watching the sun dip behind the trees and listen to the nighttime sounds of the woods. It's always been peaceful, until recently. It started about 2 weeks ago. I was on the deck, like usual, just staring into the dark, when I heard something. A snap of a twig in the distance. I didn't think much of it. Deer, maybe, or a raccoon. The woods are full of life, and I've gotten used to the noises over the years. But as the days went by, the sounds became more frequent. At first, it was just that, twigs snapping or leaves rustling, things I thought were just animals. But then, one night, I heard something different. A scratching sound. It came from the side of the house, somewhere near the window of the spare bedroom. It was quiet, almost like it was trying to be sneaky. I stood up my chair, heart pounding a little faster than usual. I waited, but nothing came after that. Probably just a squirrel, I told myself. But I didn't feel right. I decided to go inside and lock up for the night. The next evening, I heard it again. The scratching. It wasn't just at the side of the house anymore. Now it was closer. It sounded like it was coming from right outside the spare bedroom window. I froze, listening carefully, my nerves starting to fray. I couldn't explain it, but something felt off. I went to the window, pulling the curtains back slightly to see what was outside. The moonlight illuminated the trees, casting long shadows across the yard. The wind was still, and everything seemed normal. No animal, no person. I shook my head, telling myself that I was just letting my imagination run wild. It was probably a branch brushing up against the window, or maybe the wind. I convinced myself it wasn't anything to worry about and went to bed. The next night, the scratching returned. It wasn't just scratching anymore, though. It sounded like light tapping, as if someone were tapping on the window, trying to get my attention. My heart skipped a beat, and I jumped out of bed. I grabbed a flashlight and crept through the dark hallway toward the spare bedroom. When I reached the window, I shone the flashlight outside. There was nothing there. No person, no animal, just the same empty woods. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I couldn't explain it, but something was wrong. The air around me felt thick, heavy. I went back to bed, but I couldn't sleep. Every little noise seemed louder, and every creak of the floorboard sounded like someone was moving around in the house. I stayed awake, listening, but eventually I fell asleep out of sheer exhaustion. The nights went on, and the sounds didn't stop. I'd hear them every night, always the same. A tap, a scratch, sometimes even a faint whisper that seemed to come from within the walls. I tried to ignore it, but it was getting harder. One night, I decided to confront whatever was causing it. Maybe it was just an animal, I thought. Maybe a raccoon or some other critter had found its way inside. I grabbed a crowbar from the shed out back, figuring it might be a good idea to have something in case things got weird. I went to the spare bedroom and carefully opened the door. The air inside felt stale, like it hadn't been touched in ages. I hadn't used the room in months. I shone the flashlight around the room, moving slowly, checking every corner, under the bed, behind the dresser. Nothing. I stood there for a minute, feeling like an idiot. There was nothing. It was just the same old room, empty. But as I turned to leave, I noticed something. The closet door was slightly ajar. I don't remember leaving it that way. My stomach dropped. I slowly walked over and pulled open the door. Nothing was inside, but as I shone the flashlight into the back corner of the closet, I saw something strange. A small piece of cloth caught on the edge of the wall. It was dark, torn, almost like a piece of clothing. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't think straight. My mind raced. Was someone here? Had someone been inside my room? I backed out of the room, my heart thudding in my chest. I slammed the door shut and bolted it. I couldn't stay in that house another second. I went outside, hoping the fresh air would clear my mind. The darkness of the woods felt like it was closing in on me, but I tried to shake it off. Maybe it was just my nerves. Maybe the isolation was getting to me. I slept on the couch that night, a baseball bat within reach, but I didn't hear anything. No scratching, no tapping. It was quiet, almost too quiet. The next night, I decided to be brave. I was going to stay in my bed, and I wasn't going to let whatever this was drive me out of my own house. But just as I was about to drift off to sleep, I heard it again. The tap, tap, tap against the window. I jumped up, heart racing, and grabbed the flashlight. I ran to the spare bedroom, not caring how loud my footsteps were. This time, when I pulled back the curtain, I didn't just see the woods. I saw a shadow. Someone standing just outside the window, barely visible in the dim light. I froze, my blood running cold. I turned around, my mind spinning. Who was that? What were they doing here? I didn't want to believe it, but there was no denying it now. Someone had been outside my house, and they had been watching me. I ran to the phone and called 911, my hands shaking so much that I could barely dial. The operator answered, and I could barely speak through the panic in my voice. "Someone's been outside my house," I said, "and I think they're still here." I gave them my address, and they said they'd send someone out right away. I hung up and looked around the room. I needed to leave. I couldn't stay here anymore. But as I turned to grab my jacket, I heard something from the hallway, a slow creak. Someone was moving through the house. I didn't hesitate. I ran for the back door, flinging it open and tearing through the woods. I ran as fast as I could, not stopping to look back, my lungs burning with every step. By the time I made it to the edge of the property, I could see the flashing lights of the police cars in the distance. I slowed down, my body trembling, and I hid behind a tree, watching. The officers arrived at the house, guns drawn, searching the place, but I didn't stick around to find out what happened. I couldn't. I knew that whatever or whoever had been in that house, it wasn't done. I wasn't safe there anymore. I haven't gone back since. I followed up with the police to let them know I was alright so there wouldn't be a search out for me. The cabin is still there, sitting alone in the woods, but it doesn't feel like home anymore. Every time I close my eyes, I hear the tapping sound. I don't know who was in my house or what they wanted, but I know one thing for sure. They were waiting for me, and they're still out there. This happened when I was about 15 years old, back in 2008. My parents went out to the casino for the night, so it was just me and my dog Abby home alone. It was about 11 at night, and I was up messaging some friends on Instant Messenger and watching YouTube videos. As I was typing and chatting away, I heard Abby barking at something in the living room. I figured it might be my parents getting home and just waited. After about a minute or so of more barking and no sound of the door opening, I got up and went into the living room to check it out. Abby was facing the windows that looked out onto our driveway, still barking. I couldn't really see out of the windows because the lights were off outside, and it was really dark. I peered through the window and saw only the one car in our driveway, so I knew my parents hadn't come home yet. I chalked it up to Abby possibly hearing a neighbor's car door slam shut, or a particularly loud car driving by, as we lived on a main road with lots of noise, even late at night. I went back to messaging my friends, but over the next 5 minutes, I kept feeling like I was hearing noises around my house. Abby would stop and start barking again at different intervals. I was about to get up to calm her down when I could have sworn I heard a knock or a rustling sound at the living room door. I got up and slowly made my way back into the living room to look through the windows again. Nothing. I was starting to get a little nervous and was too scared to look into the peephole in case some crazy face was staring back at me. I double-checked to make sure the door was locked and was about to leave the room when the sound of knocking suddenly came from the side door of the house. My heart fluttered. I didn't know what to think. Like, did my parents get locked out and they were trying to get in? Was someone trying to break in? Was there more than one person? I barely had time to register those thoughts when I heard the sound of the doorknob from downstairs being shimmied with, like someone was trying to open it. Our basement was essentially under the house, with the entrance being pretty hidden. To get to that door, you had to walk around the entire house into our backyard and go under the deck. You'd either need to already know the door was there, or be really determined to find a way in. Abby was whimpering and barking louder than ever, running from room to room trying to locate the threat. It felt like the whole house was surrounded. The noises from the basement grew louder, and it almost sounded like whoever it was had managed to get it open, because suddenly, the noise stopped. My heart sank. I stopped breathing, standing frozen in the silence, just waiting for the next sound. Then, quick as a whip, Abby flew down the stairs and started growling maniacally at whatever was down there. Abby was a good-natured black lab who had never hurt a fly, but in this moment, I had never heard her sound more threatening. It felt like I was frozen in place for minutes. Finally, my fight-or-flight instinct kicked in when I realized Abby had stopped barking and growling. I called her upstairs and locked the door inside the house that led to the basement. I grabbed the home phone because I didn't have a cell phone yet and ran with Abby into the closet in my parents' room, where one of the guns we owned was stored. I sat there, armed and ready, about to call 911, when I suddenly heard the front door open. Abby sprinted out. I yelled no after her, but then heard the sound of my parents' voices. I ran into the living room to see them petting Abby and looking at me strangely. I spent the next several minutes recounting the events of the night to my parents. My mom was horrified, and my dad spent the next hour searching every corner of the house inside and out with his gun in hand. We didn't find anything, and I didn't sleep that night. The next afternoon, there was a knock at the front door. My heart immediately skipped a beat, and I instinctively darted into another room. My dad opened the door to find my Uncle Pete standing there with an envelope in his hand. Uncle Pete was a narcissistic creep, to say the least. He always mistreated my aunt and acted very weird around the kids and cousins at family parties. Nothing illegal as far as we knew, but he just had this way about him. You knew to try to avoid him. Growing up, I always felt a bit anxious whenever he talked to me. I can't remember anything specific he may have said, but his overall demeanor was unsettling. Even adults who spent too much time around him said he made them uncomfortable. I played softball, and his daughter, my cousin Kate, played in a league a few years below mine. I loved my cousin and always felt bad for her, having such a creepy dad, so I would often give her tips or help out her team with pitching and fielding lessons. My mom and I eavesdropped from another room and overheard Uncle Pete say something like, "I tried to stop by last night to drop it off, but no one was home, I guess." I couldn't hear much else, but shortly after, I heard my dad slam the door shut. My mom and I peeked out and asked what happened. My dad, his face quivering with anger, said that apparently Uncle Pete had been the one stomping around the house last night trying to get inside. He handed me the envelope, and I opened it to find a card with a gift card inside, thanking me for helping his daughter with softball lessons. A night of panic and terror, all at the hands of my creepy uncle. My dad had threatened him during the conversation at our front door, and after that, we never really spent time with him again. When I think about this story now, I'm at least glad I found out who was behind the incident. Otherwise, I might have spent years wondering if it had been burglars, a ghost, or something else. I'm thankful Abby was there to protect me. She most certainly scared him off when he was trying to get in through the basement. But even so, I'm still left with so many questions. What the hell was he thinking? Why did he need to drop that card off so late at night? Why didn't he get the hint that we weren't home when no one answered the front door? Why wouldn't he try calling the house to see if we were home? And worst of all, what would have happened had he gotten inside? So recently, I had an experience while I was at a friend's house alone watching his dog that inspired me to do another Home Alone themed video. I spend so much time reading stories of people's horrific experiences that I forget these things could happen to me too. In a bit of a different fashion, I'll tell that experience I had after the viewer submitted stories at the end of the video. A more positive experience I would also like to talk about is my experience with Scentbird, a fragrance subscription service that allows you to choose new designer fragrances to try out every month at an affordable price. You get to try the first fragrance from Scentbird for only $8, and your next month will be only $16.95. The vials are cheaper than a lot of the rollerballs or travel sizes you'll find elsewhere. Scentbird is a great solution for beginners in fragrance looking to experiment with certain scents. Scentbird allows you to try different designer fragrances from brands like Prada, Gucci, and Versace with a 30-day supply of any fragrance you choose. This way, if you're just getting into building your fragrance collection, you can test out what you like and what you don't without having to purchase a full bottle. Through Scentbird, I found my favorite scents: Eros Flame by Versace, which mixes Italian lemon, pink pepper, and vetiver for a classier scent, and Cross River Gorilla by Sanctuary for a more casual scent. So if you're looking to start your own collection, head on over to Scentbird by scanning my QR code using code 55nightmare to get 55% off your first month at Scentbird. Growing up, I was raised in rural Michigan. There was hardly anything to do. If you like staring at trees and crops and lots of alone time, that was the place to be. I got out of there as soon as I got a car and enough money to move. I'm not a nature hater or anything, but I'd pick being by a big city any day. My parents don't own that property anymore. They sold it 5 years ago, but to describe it, it was a 3-acre property. The house itself was pretty big, and there was a storage building out back. I was 13 when this happened. My parents would leave me alone often at this age. They trusted me because I matured at a young age and I had responsibilities on the property. It was a weekend, and I was playing Vice City on my PS2 in the living room, when suddenly, a loud metallic bang came from outside somewhere in the yard. I right away ran to every window I could to look outside to see if I could see something, and I didn't see anything until I got to the window looking out to the storage building out back. The door to it was completely open. I went immediately to grab the rifle from the closet and go outside. I made my presence known, shouting "Who's in there?" to no avail. When I got to the door, I made it known I had a gun before looking inside. There was a bunch of stuff in there, from the sit-down mower to the quad to infinite little lawn care items. Someone could have been hiding behind any of that stuff. Even as a kid, I didn't scare easily, but at that moment, I got really unsettled. And so I closed the door to the building and went back inside the house. I locked the door and then sat at the window for the longest time, watching the storage building, expecting the door to open at any second. That door was heavy and impossible to just open by itself. It was simply a fact that someone came and opened it, Whether they were still inside of the building, I wasn't sure. I decided to go call my dad and ask his opinion. I went to the kitchen to the landline phone and called my dad's cell phone. He didn't pick up, so I left a voicemail. This was back when you'd still have to leave someone a voicemail because texting wasn't mainstream. After that, I went back to sitting next to the window, but now I put on a TV show in the background to make this less monotonous. I took the phone with me. I was probably about to give up when I heard creaks from upstairs. My heart was now in my throat. I had to ask myself the big question: was I working myself up, or was someone here? I had a serious guard dog mentality. Even if I didn't love that place, I saw it as mine, my family's. I had to protect it. But I was in over my head. I grabbed the rifle again and walked upstairs. I didn't say anything. Calling out would only make a potential intruder know that I heard them. I made it to the top of the stairs, and I turned on the light for the upstairs hallway. There were 5 doors to open, all of them closed. 4 led to bedrooms, 1 led to the bathroom. Each door had a decently large crack underneath that would allow you to see under. The creak in the ceiling I heard moments earlier came from the side of the house my parents' bedroom was on, so I got down on my knees and looked under the crack of the door, and I saw 2 bare feet facing the other side of the door. I felt my stomach twist into a knot. The reality of the situation just became so much more real, and I realized I wasn't ready to threaten or, God forbid, shoot someone. I got up and quickly went downstairs, and I hid in the bathroom to call my dad. He still didn't pick up. I left another voicemail, and then I called again and again. He never picked up. He must have had his phone set down somewhere. I finally called 911, as I should have done right away, and I whispered into the phone the whole time, detailing exactly what was taking place. I was told to sit tight in the bathroom and not say a word. I heard footsteps coming down the stairs, and then they approached the bathroom door as if whoever it was somehow knew I went straight to the bathroom. The footsteps stopped outside the door, and there was a brief pause before a deep voice said, "What's up, kid?" I still remember the voice and those words so vividly. If I heard that voice today, I'd still recognize it immediately. I almost wanted to cry, that's how scared I was. I disobeyed what the operator told me, and I spoke. I said loud and clear, "I'm on the phone with the cops right now, and I have a gun." I put the operator on speaker as she was asking me if everything's okay. The man attempted to open the door, and when he realized it was locked, I heard him walk away. I heard the footsteps fade to silence, and then the sound of a door slamming. It was the sound of the back door. I'm sure I breathed a sigh of relief, and from there on, I waited for the police to arrive. When they did, I felt like 1,000,000 pounds just lifted off my shoulders. After a thorough inspection of the house inside and out, confirming that the man was gone, they asked if there was anywhere else I could stay that night, and I said yes, my uncle's house. We contacted my uncle, who came and spoke with the police. Then he took me back to his place. The thing that haunts me the most is that it was my fault. I could have prevented this. I left the door unlocked as I went to the storage building to investigate. Clearly, that's when the man simply walked right into the house. Even with a rifle in my hands, I didn't feel safe at all. It was truly the most horrific experience of my life. I was 18 when my parents went away on a week-long anniversary trip. My sister had already moved out by this point, so I had to hold the fort. My parents' property is enclosed by woods and a dirt driveway leading to the road. The road is a quiet back road with equally sized properties running alongside it, all of them separated a decent distance, so it's a really isolated feel up there. Everyone in town knows each other. You see familiar faces all the time for the most part. At the gas station, at the grocery store, at the bars, which I'd learn a few years later when I started going to them. Speaking of gas stations, this story starts one day while my parents were away. I was at a gas station filling up my tank when a black Jeep Cherokee pulled up to the pump next to mine. A man with a goatee stepped out, greeted me, and started filling his tank. In that town, it was normal for strangers to greet each other like that. He had his nozzle locked into the gas tank, and then he walked around to my side of the pump and went, "Excuse me, do you know how to get to the interstate from here?" I helped him to the best of my ability. He pulled out a notepad and started writing down the directions I gave him. Very odd how he wouldn't just do that on his cell phone like anyone else would. He thanked me and asked if I'm from the area. I said yeah, I grew up here, and he said he's from out of town. He didn't specify where. He then went back to his side and put the nozzle back in the pump. He then asked my name, as he said it's nice meeting you. I said my name's Kate. He said what a lovely name, and then got in his car as I got into mine. I drove out first and turned left to go up the road back home. It was only a few minutes worth of driving before I was approaching our turn into the driveway. I slowed down and put my blinker on, then turned right onto the property. It was at that moment that I noticed the car behind me was that same black Jeep Cherokee. He passed me as I turned into our driveway. He went the complete opposite way that I told him to go to get to the interstate. As he passed me, he didn't slow down or anything, so it seemed that maybe he just forgot the directions I gave him and went the wrong way. I let myself inside and went about the rest of my day doing whatever. I think it was that night that I was going out to meet up with my friends that I stepped outside and walked to my car and heard the sound of footsteps nearby. Like I said, the house is enclosed by woods, and this was in the middle of the summertime. It could have been any number of animals, so I didn't investigate. I just got in my car and left. But when I got back home hours later and walked from my car to the house, a man's voice from out somewhere in the woods called out Kate. I got the chills as I looked around, and then in a panic rushed to open the front door. I slammed it shut and sat on the couch to breathe. The neighbors all knew my name, but the houses are not on top of each other, so it's a bit of a walk. And there was no reason for one of them to call my name like that, like a creep, and not identify themselves. I decided to call my parents to tell them, and their explanation was it must have been one of the neighbors, and they'll probably knock on the door. I didn't tell them about the encounter at the gas station. The next day, which was a Saturday, I stayed home most of the day, and later that night, I once again was going out to meet with my friends. After getting ready and everything, I went outside, and as I was walking to my car, I heard loud and clear from the not-so-far distance someone call Kate again. This time, I didn't wait a second. I ran back inside the house and locked the door again. I called 911 this time, texting my family while doing so. After 2 cops showed up to the house, they looked around the perimeter of the property with their flashlights, then came back and said to call again if this persisted. I didn't feel much better after this. It's not really like they did much. I refrained from going outside until the next day when I had work. I was a server at a nearby restaurant. I was working a late shift. I left the house in broad daylight, paranoid to hear that voice again. Thankfully, though, I didn't. Maybe seeing the police car finally scared them off. After many hours at work, I was ready to go home and collapse into bed. I pulled onto the property, parked my car out front, and walked to the front door. I stopped when I heard the sound of footsteps again. It didn't sound like an animal's footsteps, though. I stood on the front deck for a second, waiting, and then that familiar voice yelled out again, saying, "Kate, don't call the cops on me again, cutie." I yelled out, "You need help, you're sick," and let myself inside. I called the cops once more, and the cops came again, searched the perimeter again, and left. My parents told me I should stay at a friend's house for the night. I couldn't agree more. They would be back the following night, so after that, I would feel much safer being there. My friend Alex told me I could stay with her that night, so I packed a bag and was ready to go. I checked out the windows first to make sure the coast was clear. I then went outside and locked the door as fast as I could, then ran to the car. As I turned the key in the ignition, I heard something right to my left. Right outside the driver's side door was a man wearing a face mask trying to open the door. I couldn't even scream. I felt like I was choking on air. As I put the car in drive, he started hitting the glass with his elbow. I looped my car around on the grass and sped down the driveway, and I turned right up the road and didn't stop until I got to Alex's house. I was hysterically crying the whole drive there as I had Alex and her dad on the phone with me. He said he would have come and picked me up had he known the situation. We called the police together for a 3rd time in total. A couple officers went to my parents' house to investigate again, make sure no windows were shattered or anything. One officer came to Alex's house where I once again gave my description of what happened. This was probably the most action these cops had seen in a long time in this quiet town. Thankfully, my parents came home the next day, and I felt safe staying at home again. I fully believe the man at the gas station followed me home intentionally and scoped the place out, realizing I was by myself, and for whatever reason toyed with me until he actually tried to pounce and get me. I shouldn't have given my real name, and I should have been more alert to my surroundings and realized he was following me in my car that day. Some people are nuts and have way too much time on their hands. This incident was a huge motivating factor in my moving out to my own apartment a few months later. I was home alone one night for a reason I don't remember. All I remember is my entire family was gone. I was 15 or 16 years old. I was a big gamer at the time. I was obsessed with StarCraft, and admittedly, I'd sometimes spend a weekend night or two playing StarCraft or some other PC game. This was right before COVID lockdown started. I was playing StarCraft on my computer in my bedroom on the first floor. That's when the doorbell rang, twice. I hurried to the door, not wanting to be away from the game for too long in fear of losing. I got to the front door and said, "Who is it?" as I always would if I was alone. A soft and weak voice on the other side said something that I couldn't hear. It sounded like a woman. I opened the door, with the storm door still separating me and this older woman standing on the other side, with a big smile on her face. She had her hands behind her back. I said through the door, "Can I help you?" She said she needed to use a phone, and asked if she could come inside. Ever since I was a little kid, I was always taught not to let a stranger into the house, ever. That included women. I felt so awkward though, I didn't know how to turn her away. I redirected her to the library a few blocks down, because they'd surely have a phone. Deep down, I knew the library was closed at this point, but I was just trying to get the stranger who was trying to get into my house to leave. She was still smiling, but what she said next did not match her smile. She said, "That's very rude to turn away an old lady asking for help." I replied the only way I could think to, and that was that my parents don't allow strangers into the house. It's a house rule. I slowly started closing the door as I was saying sorry, and she just stood there, not moving but still smiling at me. And though her smile never changed, it suddenly felt much more menacing. I was walking back to my room when the doorbell rang again. There was no way in hell I was opening the door again. That woman radiated weird vibes from the start. Maybe something was wrong with her, maybe she wasn't all there. These were things I had no way of knowing, and maybe that was selfish of me to send her on her way. But I just wasn't opening the door for anyone when I was home alone. I went back to my game. Not too long after I sat back down, I heard something tapping on the window. It was a clinking type sound from something metal. The window was directly in front of my desk. I had the blind pulled down so I couldn't see what was making the noise, but I already had an idea. My room was the only room with a light on in the house. The horrible thought that it was the old woman from just before, and that she walked over to my window, terrified me. I turned off the sound on my computer. At this point, I didn't care about my game anymore. The clinking sound on the window persisted. I basically said, "Fuck this," and up and left to a different room in the house. I sat in the darkness of the living room for a bit, when the doorbell rang again. This woman was harassing me now. I tried to convince myself she wasn't a threat, just some crazy old woman who's probably clueless as to where she is. When she rang the doorbell a second and third time, I decided to go open the door and ask her if there's someone I could call for her. But when I opened the door, there was now a man on the other side. He looked to be about 10 years younger than her. He said through the storm door, "Have you seen my mother?" I replied saying yes, she came to my door just before. He then apologized to me and said she has dementia and got out of the house. I suddenly felt bad, but he asked me if he could come in for a minute, and again I felt awkward. Why did he need to come inside? I said the same thing that I told to the woman who we claimed to be his mother. I said we could just talk through this door. I then said that I think she went into my backyard because I heard something at my window. I told him he could go around back and check. He thanked me and walked down the walkway, and I thought he went into the backyard. But when I went to the back and looked out the back window expecting to see him searching around, I saw nobody. Not him or his mom. This was all too weird for me. I went to bed on the earlier side that night, just falling asleep with the TV on in the background, until I heard the clinking sound on the window again. Something metal was tapping on the glass. I remembered the concerned man, and I decided to try and help. I went to the window, lifted the blind up with my hand, and I saw that woman outside my window with that same creepy smile. She was tapping a kitchen knife on my window. I closed the blind and crawled back into my bed. This didn't feel like it was actually happening. A suspiciously short amount of time later, the doorbell rang like 4 times. The clinking on the window stopped by this point. This was all too suspicious. It felt like some kind of robbery attempt. I ignored the doorbell. I stayed in my bed. I was gonna wait this out. I didn't have a cell phone at this time. I wasn't the most social guy growing up. I also didn't want to call the police for some reason. I waited this all out until it finally stopped. The next morning, I told my dad what happened when I called him. He told me I was smart not to open the door. Everyone agreed that everything about it sounded like an attempted robbery. Is there a chance that maybe that woman really did have dementia and that the man was really her concerned son? Maybe, but it all seemed too coordinated. Why did he want to come into the house too? How did he even know she came to my house specifically? Why didn't he ever go into the backyard to look for her when I gave him permission to do so? Too many unanswered questions that lead me to believe I avoided something terrible happening if I opened that door. So as I mentioned at the start of the video, a week ago as I'm recording this, something happened to me personally that inspired me to revisit this theme. So my friend Cody asked me to watch his dog Theo for the night. Theo's a little pomsky and he barks a lot, so when he started barking like crazy at something going on outside, I didn't pay any attention to it besides telling him to be quiet a few times. But when he went to the back door and kept barking, I figured he wanted to go outside. So I was going to the back door to open it, but as I got close to the door, I realized someone was trying to open the door from the outside. And then I saw through the screen of the door there was another guy looking right back at me. This was in the backyard, which was already alarming enough, and he wasn't someone I recognized to be a family member of Cody's. So I asked him who he is, and he responded asking me if I'd seen Melissa. Melissa is Cody's younger sister who's in her 20s. Meanwhile, this guy looked like he was in his mid-50s and homeless. So I told him he needs to leave. There's no Melissa who lives here. And he said, "You sure?" So I said, "Yeah, you need to leave. There's cameras all over the property." He left right after that. Getting him to leave was easy, but when Cody asked his sister who that guy could have been, she said she had no idea. The guy looked like he was 55, drunk and filthy. Not exactly someone Cody's 20-something-year-old sister would be associating with. The fact that he went to the back door and tried letting himself in was actually pretty terrifying because you could only imagine what he was trying to do to Melissa, and it's why so many of these stories could be avoided by just keeping your doors locked.